Making a pen starts with a 3/4 by 3/4 by 2 1/8 inch blank, which is then drilled and the brass insert is glued in, and then that is basically just rounded to get to your starting point. This is where your kits start. This is a pen mandrel already loaded and ready to go. It gets put into the lathe headstock, and you can see that there's 2 bushings, a blank, 2 bushings, a blank, 2 bushings, and the tension nut. The extra bushings in between the blanks just keep your chisels away from the metal while you're working on the blank itself. Once the mandrel is in the headstock, the tailstock is brought up into the end of the mandrel, self-centers, lock the tailstock in place, and snug up. So here we are, ready to start turning. Your next step is to just gently turn the cylinder down until it's the diameter that you're interested in. We're going to target about a 7/16 diameter pen. So here's a finished turn where we've used a 7/16 inch wrench while it's on the lathe to just keep turning it down and down until it's a uniform diameter. At that point, you can use your chisel to just taper the ends a little bit to meet the diameter of the bushings. This is just a set of sanding sheets ranging from 150 grit to 600 grit held together with a clamp, so that while you're sanding down, you can start with the 150 and just lightly sand to take all of your chisel marks out and progress your way up through the sheets to the 600 grit. So the finish that your papa sent you is by Mylands. It's a nice finish. Just takes a couple of coats. You put it right on the lathe. So 2 or 3 drops on a piece of paper towel. Wipe it on the blank.
Wait a couple minutes.
Wait a minute or two, and then you'll just spin up the lathe and buff it with a cloth. So here we are spinning it up, running probably about 700 to 800 RPM.
I go up 900.
And then just gently buff it with the cloth. Move the cloth back and forth a little bit so you don't get streaks, and keep moving to a clean section of cloth as the cloth gets wax on it.
And it will get warm.
You want to do this until the blank itself is nice and warm. The idea here is to actually melt the wax into the grain of the wood. Time to press the pen. The first step is to lay everything out in order, follow the instruction sheet. You've got the tip, the lower barrel, the transmission, the ink fill, the collar, then separately the upper blank, the clip, and the cap. These are the adapters to turn your lathe into a pen press. There's small magnets in each one that hold them into the head and tail stock. So one is going to go into the headstock.
With the hole.
The one with the hole goes in the headstock. The magnet will just hold it in there. And then the other guy goes in the tailstock, and you're ready to go. Okay, the first step is to insert the tip into the lower barrel. If you look close, you can see there's a small shoulder. You can push it in by hand. Push the tip into the hole on the headstock side, and then bring up your tailstock and slowly turn up the tailstock until the lower barrel closes in on the tip. A little farther, you can see it closing in, and there, that's closed up. You're all done. Should be a nice smooth fit if you've carved your lower blank right. So the brass end of the transmission goes into the lower tube, and if you look really close on the right hand end of this brass tube, there's a small ring. You should be able to push the transmission by hand into that ring and then start pressing it in. So we're just going to hold that in place and start turning up the tailstock till it just touches. Now, to account for any variances in the lower tube, we're going to stop pressing when it's not quite all the way to the end of the brass. Right about there is good. Now we're going to back off and we're going to test the ink refill to see if it's actually extending out the front of the pen far enough or not.
Gotta go more.
So we'll just screw the refill into the transmission, turn the transmission by hand, and take a look at the pen front and see if the tip comes out far enough.
Which it does not.
This tip does not come out far enough, so we'll take the refill back out, put it back in the press, and press the transmission in just a little more. We're watching the brass. That's our reference. That's good. So we're going to press it in a little more and a little more and a little more, and that looks good. And we'll take it out and test again. It's much better to not press it far enough and have to come back for a third time than it is to press it too far. So the refill goes in, and we're watching the point out here. And as we turn the transmission by hand,
just coming out.
now you can see that it's just barely coming out. So there it is, it's just barely coming out. So we're going to press it just a hair more. Third time doesn't hurt. Better an extra press than have gone too far. So again, we're watching the lines on the transmission for our reference. And we're going to press it in until the brass disappears on this one. A little more, a little more. Yeah, that's probably looking good. We'll test again. We'll just keep doing this until it's the way we like it. Here, hold it over here. So here we go. It's going in. There, now we can see that comes out like it should. So that's done. That's ready to go. Okay.
That's it?
The next step is to take the center collar and just slide it down over the transmission. It'll be a little tight. Just slide it down against the first blank. All right, time to press the top part. The easiest way, we think, is to push the cap into the hole in the top of the clip. And then, just like the other pieces, push the cap into the little collar. Bring your tailstock up. Oop, yes, sometimes you'll drop it. There we go. Just pushed into that first little shoulder. And the key here, I think, is when you put it in the press, hold the cap back against the tailstock so it holds your cap in, and then crank it up, and there we've made contact very gently, just keeping it straight, and there you can see it starting to slide in. Just before you're done, check and make sure you've got the clip where you want it. As long as the clip is located where you want it on the grain of the wood. Sometimes it doesn't make a difference, sometimes it does. And then finish pressing it in. And when the clip won't move anymore, you're fully pressed. You do want to be careful because with all the multiplying force of the screw in the tailstock, you can over tighten these and actually crush a pen. So at this point we've got the tip, the lower barrel, the transmission is in, the collar's in. Now you just slide the two pieces together.
Yeah.
There we go. And voila, a finished pen. Nice.